Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soul and welcome to another CIQ demo. Today I am super excited to show you this because frankly I'm sick of looking at it. No, actually I've just been putting a lot of time into this, and so I'm really pleased for it to see the light of day. But in this one I'm going to be showing you how to use automation to export all of your information from one AWX based system and push it into another. And so specifically in this demo, I'm going to be showing you how to pull all of your information out of the Ansible automation platform by Red Hat and push it into a clean Ascender install. So let's get started. Right here, I've got my AAP server configured. You can see I've got hosts, inventories, projects. I got a little bit of everything in here. And I'm going to go to the template section because I've already created the templates inside of here. So I'm actually using AAP itself to do the migration. Now, this could be the source system that I'm going to do the export from and then push over to the remote. I could be running it from there. I could be running it on the remote side. It really doesn't matter. In my case, in all of my testing, I actually did it from a third Ascender server, right? Just kind of sitting off to the side. So it really doesn't matter what's doing the pull and the push. It should work kind of the same all the way through. So in here, I've got two playbooks. I've got the export one and the import one. The export one, I'm going to hit the little edit button on it really quick, just so you could see I have the inventory configured, project, the playbook, and there's a blog post associated with all this. So fret not trying to take screenshots. It'll all be available and easily explained to you. I'm using also a couple of credentials, one to log into a remote server. So I'm using kind of a third-party server to store all of the exported configurations, right? So it's just going to push to this little server. Now, later down the road, I'm going to be doing a 2.0 version of this, showing you some really cool stuff I'm going to be implementing with it. And that one's going to be actually pushing to your Git repository. That's a couple of extra steps. And so I just wanted to keep this as simple as possible for everybody. So for now, it's just kind of saving those files to just a random server that happens to exist somewhere. Here I'm using my cloud credential. I created a custom credential to actually log into the exported source. In this case, it's actually going to be exporting from itself right here in the variables section. So export host is an important option. And so I'm passing this in as, hey, who's the host that I want to actually export this information from? You could edit the playbook if you wanted to, but I'd prefer to just pass it in as extra vars. Anyway, that's it on the configuration side. And now all I'd have to do is hit launch. Through the magic of cooking show editing, I've already exported all this information. So let me take a look at the export playbook really quick, just to tell you the pieces you really need to know about it, just kind of get all of that out of the way. So export playbook is pretty simple. You see there's not very many steps. It's really just going to connect in and export all the things that you are specifying for it to do so. And so really it's in this export object section. So anything that is uncommented here is something that's going to get exported, and it's going to create kind of an individualized file for that thing, right? So application, credentials, credential type, all that stuff, I've got it set to export off. Now, if there was something in here I didn't want to export, comment it out, and guess what? It doesn't export it when you run it. So again, down here, you could see the environment variables that I'm setting up. So I'm using the AWX.AWX collection to actually connect into the export as well as the import piece. And right here in the environment section is where it kind of sets up all those little variables. Now you could hard code username and password if you wanted to. I'm using, again, a custom credential. So it's stored in my either Ascender or AAP, right? It's kind of securely stored in there, and it's pulled out at execution time and utilized in my playbooks. That way I can keep all this stuff in a public Git repository, and I don't have to worry about, leaking secret information. Also, you can see the export host variable in there. Remember, that's the extra var I'm passing over. Hey, telling it, what server am I connecting to actually export this stuff out? Now, once it does export out, I am taking all those files and I'm just sticking them in a folder right here called configs. And you can see here they are, nothing too crazy in there. So say, for example, applications, right? It's just spitting all this stuff out in kind of YAML format. Nothing too nutty there. So it's easy to look at, it's easy to configure if I want to. So that's all of the exported information. Now let's do the import, right? That's got to be more complicated, right? In fact, it is not more complicated. In here, I'm going to take a look at the import playbook. I'm going to hit the edit button. It's very much the same. All the same configurations, except instead of the export playbook, it's the import playbook. Same credentials because I'm using the same authentication on both sides. And then I've got imported hosts. So remember, before we had exported hosts, now we have imported hosts. And it's going into my Ascender Test9 server. And let me hit cancel there. And just before I actually run this, here is the Ascender Test9. You can see the number of hosts, inventories, projects, right? All of that's lower, right? I think well, let's just take a look here. Look at the dashboard. We went from 18, 9, and 11 down to basically 0, 1, and 4, right? So Ascender has some projects, and it actually has some job templates in there. I believe it's got 6 job templates if I check. The other one, I believe, has 30 job templates. Let me take a look really quick. So by the end of this, there should be 36 job templates in the Ascender Test9 server, right? The one that it's kind of being imported into. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the import playbook. And while I do that, I'm just going to talk briefly about the import playbook. I just want to walk you through some of those pieces. So right here in the import playbook, some of the stuff to keep in mind is it's the exact same variable. So it says export objects, and anything that's in here is actually going to get imported into my new import server, right? Whichever one I'm pointing to, all of these values are going to get imported in there. So if there's anything that I don't want, technically I can uncomment, or rather I can comment that out, and it won't attempt to do the import. Now, keep in mind that some things do require various objects. Right? And so if you're going to import the entire thing, so I'm doing a full export and a full import, you have to actually do some of those things in order, right? So say, for example, I'm trying to bring in a job template that has a specific execution environment. Well, if I didn't import in that execution environment and the system doesn't know about it, when I try and add in that job template that's calling an unknown execution environment, it's going to fail, right? So you have to kind of keep in mind order of operation. All this taken care of for you in here if you're doing a full export, full import. But if you're just trying to piecemeal it, keep in mind your mileage may vary on some of that stuff. Now, something else that happens is by default, when you import an inventory, it doesn't bring in hosts or groups. So if you look right here, I've got add_host, add_groups. They're both true by default. And so if you are importing inventories, it will bring in your host and groups as well. So if you're doing dynamic inventories, no problem. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff because it's all going to get brought in and populated on demand, right? Like as you refresh that project or synchronize that, or rather that inventory. As you synchronize that inventory, it'll bring all that information in. But for me, a lot of my environments are static because I just do a lot of testing, a lot of demoing. So I did want to bring all that stuff in, and I had to kind of build out all of those pieces to make all that happen. Now, this playbook also has the option to filter users that are imported. So if I am importing users, I can filter out which ones. And so you can see I have the admin user is filtered out because that's what I'm actually using to do the import stuff. And whenever you bring users in by default, there is no password. So if you import the admin user halfway through your automation, it's going to break because you can't connect anymore. So keep in mind, if you want to filter anything out, you can do that right here. I also have the ability to filter out scheduled jobs if you want to. So I pull out all the system ones because they're already going to be there. And then we hit kind of the task section. Now, I just want you to keep kind of a mental tally. From here, the top all the way until we actually start doing processing, I have to do a lot of configuration manipulation on the variables, on the data type, the way it looks like. I have to do some formatting. I have to build some stuff in the case of hosts and groups. And so there's a lot of stuff you have to fix. Some of it is just the way the collection works and expected in a specific format. Some is the COP roles that I'm using. So the community of practice built some awesome roles for pulling this stuff in, and I'm super glad they did because it makes the processing much faster on some of this stuff. The importing and exporting can be a little bit slow in the way they've written them. It makes the importing really fast. But you can take a look at this. All of this is me just formatting variables, manipulating things, making it all work. And so there was a ton I had to actually put into this thing. All right, now we actually get to the processing section. So here, I wanted to kind of explain what I'm doing a little bit on some of this. Now, if you take a look at it, you can see I have a block and rescue on every one of these things that I'm importing. I found that sometimes, especially for larger chunks of information, you'll actually error out if it's trying to import a lot of stuff. And I found if you're really hammering the API, especially on machines that are kind of lower resources, which mine are in my lab environment, I don't give them a ton of resources, right? Just because they're little test boxes. And so I can overrun the API and I'll start getting like connection refusal or connection fail errors. And so a block and rescue allows you to, the block portion will try and complete. If anything fails inside of there, it'll kick over to the rescue portion. And in the rescue portion, I'm running the exact same rule. I'm calling the exact same thing. So I'm basically giving it a second try. And I found in my testing, most of the time this works just fine. Occasionally, it will fail and I'll need to just run the playbook one more time and everything works fine. I've not had it, an opportunity where running it, right, because each time I run this, it's going to technically try each task twice. I've had no opportunity, or rather no instance where running it the 4 times didn't actually get it all working. But it should go through and do all of the export. So now that I have talked, I'm going to pop back over to the running automation. You can see it's processing, and through the magic of editing, you won't have to watch all this. I'll pause and come back when it's ready. Now that everything has completed, it completed successfully. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and let's see if we hit any rescues. So if you do in your blocks, you actually hit that rescue section, it would show up down here. So I'm showing rescue 0. That means it actually processed all the way through correctly the first time, which, I mean, good for us. So we had very few objects inside of the previous ascender. Let's go back to the dashboard. All right, there's our 18 hosts, our 10 inventories, all of our projects. If I go to templates, we did have 6. We should have 36. Yeah, there they are. So everything was able to import in correctly. So question, is this perfect? No, this is not, right? It's not going to do absolutely everything. So there are some caveats. I kind of got my little list over here. I'm taking a look at it. So as I mentioned earlier, whenever you bring in credentials, I think I mentioned it on credentials, or at least users, there are no passwords, right? So that's something that you don't necessarily want to export out in plain text. All of your credential passwords, you probably don't want that showing up. And so the export process doesn't actually pull that stuff out. Now, in the case of credentials, if you are using, say, for example, a secrets engine, which is just a server that sits off to the side, and the automation will query that at runtime for those actual secrets, right? Whether it be a password, username, sometimes tokens, keys, all that stuff. If you're using a secrets engine, no big deal, right? It's just going to be referencing that secrets engine and everything will work just fine. Now, on the case of users, it's kind of a little tricky. So user accounts, if you're using some external authentication system like LDAP, probably what you want to do is have all of your users log into the new server you're going to be migrating to first, right? Get all those accounts created via LDAP, and then you can do the migration process. The problem there is if you have a user account that's kind of a physical local account, it won't attempt to do the LDAP lookup first, right? It'll just like accept that. So one workaround could be, yeah, have everybody log in first, or potentially just don't export and import users, right? Something else that's a big one that I would say look for in version 2.x on this, or 1.x, because this is our very first iteration of this, is roles. And so while it is exporting role information, the AWX.AWX collection isn't importing role information, right? So if you are very specifically setting up roles, that's not going to be there. Now, in most environments, you'll have teams, right, which are just groups, and you're going to put those roles on said teams, and so they'll import that information. So you don't usually have that many teams, right, to adjust the roles. And so if you did have to kind of do that one time, it doesn't seem like it would be that big a deal, especially when you kind of factor in how much time you're going to be saving doing most of the automation or most of the migration automatically. So again, that's just something to keep track of, and that's something we want to definitely address in the future. So keep that in mind. So something else is that the export module isn't doing server settings. So say, for example, like your logging settings and things like that. It's not the export module in the AWX.AWX collection isn't pulling that information out. Now it is available in the API, and so we can pull that out and we can push it. And so again, that's going to be something we're working on adding into the next iteration. So keep your eyes open for that. Now, I hope you saw how quickly and easily you can pull almost all of your automation information and push it into a nice, fresh, clean server. And again, this will move information from Ascender, AWX, AAP, and push it into any one of those other ones, right? So I could pull from one Ascender box and push into another. So this could be something I use for, I've got my test environment and I'm pulling and then pushing into a dev environment and then pulling and pushing into a prod maybe, something like that. It could be really good for just kind of cloning a system when you want to do a little tweaking testing over here, try some various things. Maybe it's kind of a backup method, and it also kind of gives you an idea of how you can store your information, kind of config as code. So if you do an export, it could give you a good template to sort of build future things on. So I do have a new version of this, right? Kind of a new use case where you have a primary server that you do all your configuration on, and the ultimate goal is it will back up its configuration. So it'll export it to a Git repository, and then from there it will allow all of the other remotes kind of all over the globe to connect in and pull those configs into their systems, right? So that'll be a pretty cool use case, I think. I would say look out for that. Now, we've reached the portion of the video where I say if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them. If you would like some help migrating from another system over to Ascender, we would be delighted to help you with that. We do support for all this stuff, and we do it fairly affordably. So thank you for watching. Happy automating, happy migrating, happy ascending, and we'll see you next time. Bye.